Hi, I'm Judd Carlton. Welcome to the Psyched Up About Money blog. Today we have Gordon Brewer joining us. Gordon is from the Practice of Therapy podcast. It is a wonderful podcast. He's prolific. Gordon, welcome.
Thanks. Thanks, Judd. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, great. Really happy to have you. You have covered so many topics. You're always putting out something new. One thing that I thought would be really interesting to talk about is the financial side of private practice and things that you'd like to highlight about that.
So, yeah, to jump into this, one of the things that I think most of us that go into this whole kind of mental health space in terms of being in private practice and owning our own practices. I know for me, when I was in graduate school, that was kind of a dream that was in the back of my head, was to own my own practice. And eventually, after working for an agency for almost 10 years, I realized that I really wanted kind of the autonomy that being in private practice would hopefully afford me. And so I kind of jumped in and realized once I got into it, that I really had not learned along the way kind of the financial side of things. I remember talking to a friend who was an accountant and trying to seek some advice from him just around that. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Where do I start? Just starting a business. What is that? How do you do that? What forms do I need to fill out and all of those kinds of things. And so he kind of at the very basic level is that you want to set up a separate entity, or at least with a sole proprietorship, just being able to have a separate checking account and really treating it separate from your personal finances. And the more I got into it and the more I learned, I realized, okay, there's so much of this stuff I didn't know, but I did learn it eventually. I really kind of immersed myself in kind of learning these things, just learning about things like, what is QuickBooks? What is, how do you keep financial records? How do you collect money from clients? All of those things were just stuff that I didn't know how to do. And the other part of it is in running a business is just understanding how being self-employed is different than being employed, and just learning about self-employment taxes and all of those kinds of things are all parts of it. And the other part of being self-employed is that it takes a little bit of self-discipline, because you do have to track everything, and being able to know about cash flow and how money is coming in, and learning about your profit margins and making a profit and all of those kinds of things, and what to pay yourself, and if you move into group practice, how do you pay your employees? Yeah, just a lot of stuff that I had to learn along the way. And a lot of it, I've made some mistakes along the way with it, but I've also learned a whole lot. I think one mistake that people that go into private practice make is that they assume that you will just build it and they will come. Well, it doesn't exactly happen that way. You have to be able to build a client base and begin to build those referral sources. So in the meantime, you need to pay yourself. So learning how to being prepared for it financially before you go into it is an important piece. One of the things that I recommend, and I know this was true for my own journey, is that I really kind of started part-time into private practice, and was really spent, before I made the full dive into full-time private practice, I spent a year building a reserve for myself, in terms of making sure that I had enough money if I hit a slow time. Because one of the fears is that, okay, what if I stop getting clients, or what if something like COVID hits or something like that, are you going to be financially prepared for that? And so a lot of what I do with the podcast and just with the practice of therapy is to teach people some of those skills and teach them, give them the knowledge about those things.
Yeah, that's wonderful. You highlight so many important things there. It's I would imagine at a certain point you felt like, I know I want to do this, and this is the time. And
Mhm.
having that confidence and that realization is great.
Mhm.
But also hearing what you're saying, which is, there's confidence and there's overconfidence.
Mhm.
And as
Right.
long as you know which side of that you're on, something to help which side of that you're on is a resource like what you're talking about. And you're right,
Right.
you don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have come before us. You can stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
and that's just fantastic, right? Because then I would imagine you'd say you get past some of these initial hurdles, and then right, it was worth the journey.
Right, right. When I first went into private practice, there weren't nearly the resources that there are now about how to run kind of the business side and the financial side of private practice. I'm going to date myself a little bit, but when I first went into private practice around 2006, I think there were a couple of books that were out about running a private practice. But that was about it. And so as I got into it and really started building my practice, I really figured out that, one of the things I enjoyed doing is kind of sharing what I learned along the way. I just felt like, that was kind of my way of kind of giving back. And so that's when I started the practice of therapy, originally as a blog, and now it's a podcast, and blog kind of thing. But, fortunately, we now have a lot of us that are doing that, doing offering private practice coaching and consulting and that kind of thing. And so it's really blossomed over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's great. And I feel like a great resource as a business owner is just talking to other business owners, especially if they're in the
Right.
same field.
Right. Yeah, that and you bring up a good point, because I think one of the mistakes I made early on was not really seeking out enough mentorship in that journey. If I One of the things that I have benefited from immensely was getting involved in things like mastermind groups, and also talking to, like you said, other people that have been there before, and getting some coaching and some mentoring along the way. And every time I have done that, it has just really kind of upped the game for me in my practice and building that side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I would throw in here too is that private practice isn't necessarily for everyone. And I think you have to really kind of know yourself well about how you want to approach this. For anybody going into any kind of business, I think you have to have a bit of an entrepreneurial kind of spirit to you, being able to take a little bit of risk. I think it's good to take calculated risks, but you do have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there to make that leap. But also, just getting what makes it less scary is getting some coaching and mentoring along the way, and just like you said, learning from those that have come before.
Yeah. I found coaching to be very valuable at certain times as well in my career.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So one thing I had seen you talk about recently that I found very interesting was expanding practices beyond the therapy room. So that's something that sort of opened my eyes to some.
Right. Yeah. One of, I think for most people that go into private practice, they really, um, they go in just thinking, okay, I want to be a solo practitioner, hang my shingle out and have my office and that sort of thing. Or some people, seek out joining a group that's already established or whatever. But one of the things about with this type of service that we offer is there's a limit to how much of that we can provide just as an individual. And so you can very quickly get your practice full. You can have lots of clients, but there's a limit to that. In other words, you can hit a ceiling, or some would call it maybe a glass ceiling, but you can hit a ceiling because there's so many clients you can see in a day. I'm very sorry. Only so many clients that you can see in a day, and there's only so many clients you can take on. And so that just, once you reach that point, your earning potential, unless you go up on your rates, and again, there's only so much you can go up on your rates, you really kind of can hit that ceiling. So one of the things that's important is to be able to look for ways to diversify your income streams that aren't necessarily within the therapy room. Now, certainly you could you go from the one-to-one way of providing therapy to the one-to-many. And first thing that people think about are maybe starting groups where they do group therapy. So you're getting a larger volume of money for the time you're committing to your field. But the other thing to look at is that a lot of the skills that we folks that are therapist types can translate in a lot of different other ways. So really looking outside the therapy room in terms of creating other businesses or other ways to create income. So like when I started the practice of therapy, that was kind of with that in mind for me. And so I really wanted to provide resources and tools for other therapists to be able to build their practice. And so that was really kind of the thing there. But you can also do the same type of thing to your client base or to your niche. And a few things that come to mind of ways that you can do that is offer workshops and seminars that you can charge for, being able to offer online courses. Where there's just this is a great time to be doing that sort of thing. So, for example, maybe offering like an anger management course or parenting courses, those kinds of things that are usually things that are in high demand. Also being able to, podcasting has really become it's really kind of taking the place of blogs to some degree of what we think about of being able to produce content that people are willing to pay for. And so with the podcast, there are just numerous therapists that have gone into podcasting really with the idea of providing content that are helping people with specific issues. And then you can monetize that in a lot of different ways, having people sponsor your podcast, offering other products and services that you direct people to through the podcast. Another area where a person can really begin to diversify their practice, and this is really one of the easier. I say it's easy. It's but it's really kind of a natural progression, is to go from a solo practice to a group practice, and being able to reap the benefits of getting paid for what other people are doing within your practice. And so that's what some people would think of as a low-hanging fruit for a lot of practices, particularly if you are a solo practitioner and you are full and you've got a waiting list. Two things you need to do: one, go up on your prices, and two, really think about, do you want to refer people out to somebody outside your practice, or would you want to bring somebody on and be able to, reap the benefit of that person's work as well? So those are the kind of things that I think about. The other thing about why I feel like diversifying income is important is because we've all hit slow periods within our practice. You know, I mean, you mentioned, you know, the COVID pandemic that we're hopefully on the tail end of. We're recording this, but we so many of us kind of took a hit. I remember back in March and April of last year, a year ago, or from this moment that we're recording this, we just hit a big dip in the number of referrals and the people coming to see us. They were, you know, people were just kind of didn't know what to do. And so, yeah. And so being able to have a diversity of income kind of helps with that buffer that I mentioned about having a way to pay yourself when you're not exactly seeing clients. So, yeah, I threw a lot out there. So,
yeah, there's a lot of great info there. One thing that I feel like for many who may be hearing these ideas for the first time, or maybe just considering it seriously for the first time, a question that they might think of is, okay, I can see that there are people out there who are finding success with these approaches. Is it for me, you know, anything new is going to be a heavy lift, right? Going from the employee side of it to private practice, right? That's big. That may be one of the biggest things a therapist will do in his or her career. So maybe compared to that kind of a change, a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you want, how big a lift is it to maybe start up from scratch, start up something like a podcast, or how big a lift to start up a group practice if you have, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. I think as much as anything, what you have to really kind of do is adopt as I like to call it, adopt an attitude of being consistent and persistent. You know, anytime you start something new, you really have to, particularly when it's a business, particularly what I've learned with the practice of therapy, is it started off just really slow and it didn't just really gain a lot of traction. But because I was persistent and consistent with putting out content and just constantly getting stuff out there, it started to grow. And I think with any sort of, whether it's a practice or any other sort of business, once you gain some momentum and you kind of reach this point where you gain a critical mass of just the momentum, it just kind of rolls from there. I know that's not a real concrete way of thinking about it. It's more of a metaphor, but I think that as much as anything is really being able to find a niche that you're passionate about, number one, you know, whatever it might be. You know, there are, you know, a lot of my colleagues that are doing in this same kind of podcasting and also consulting space. All of them have areas at which they're passionate about. I think about somebody like Dr. Melissa Hall. She's really big on the documentation and being able to talk about that. My friend Dr. David Hall is really big on helping people figure out how to do things outside the therapy room to bring in income, those kinds of things. So there's a lot of room there for being able to think about getting stuff started. But as far as going back to your question, the heavy lifting, I think as much as anything, you can do as much or as little as you want to around that. I've always been one to think of doing things in small bites, but being consistent with that and just adding to it. You know, I think it's a misnomer to think you're going to get rich quick. You've got to put in the work to it. And I think just by doing small things and putting small things into action over time will be cumulative, and you build from that way. So, yeah.
I think that's a great point to make. I think it makes it a lot less intimidating, right? Mm-hmm. You like look at a fully developed site with a lot of momentum like you've got, right? No one's going to get there in a day.
Right. And there's a quote I love, and I can't remember who coined it. It might have been somebody like Pat Flynn or somebody like that, but they said, never compare your starting point to somebody else's middle,
Mm.
because they also had a starting point. I mean, I remember very well my starting point, and my website was lousy. I get, sometimes I'll be brave and go back and listen to some of my earlier podcasts.
Oh, you are brave.
Oh yeah, I just think, did I really do it that way? Kind of thing. So yeah, so the key is just to start, and that's the thing, and just realize that you're just going to be persistent with it, and over time it will grow and it will come to fruition.
Yeah. That's great. Good. So it's really a lot of opportunity there from what
Right.
intimidated. If you've got any interest, right, there's some kind of a subject that energizes you every time you talk about it.
Right.
Maybe that's the direction you go.
Yeah. And I think, too, as people hear from me on my podcast all the time, is I think with anything that you do in life, you really need to start with why. What is your why behind what you're going to pursue? And so, I think that's the first place, you really have to think about. I mean, even going into private practice, you've got to think about your why. Why would you want to do that, as opposed to just go work for somebody else? Because, in reality, there's going to be a lot less headaches with working for somebody else. You don't have to worry about taxes as much. You don't have to worry about all the different moving pieces that owning your own business or your practice requires. But again, you got to think about what is your payoff for doing all of those things. I love the challenge of it. I love being able to figure things out and being able to be creative in that way. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is, so you must be very organized. So much. What are some of the productivity tools or systems?
Right. Well, don't let me fool you. If I were to pan back and you were to see my desk, you would see that I'm not necessarily an organized person, but no, it is something I have to put some effort into. And again, it's something I had to learn how to do, because again, something I say all the time. It's not something that comes naturally to me. And so I've had to teach myself a lot of productivity kinds of things, and learn some of the, time management and goal setting and all of that sort of thing. One of the things that I'm a big fan of, though, is productivity, in terms of learning how to stay on track with things. I've got a few tools that I use. I've got, first of all is Google Workspace. I love using that, as far as that being one of my practice platforms, particularly on the business side of things. I use a planner. It's a paper-based planner. It's called the Full Focus Planner, and it's produced by Michael Hyatt and Company. And I absolutely love that as a way to really keep me on track with my organization. It's laid out in a way that just makes sense to me, and just really being very goal oriented, and also just being able to take things in small chunks rather than trying to get overwhelmed by all the different things that are going on. And then I'll also just clinically, on the clinical side of things within my practice, I've got an electronic health record system, Therapy Notes, that we use, which again helps me keep organized with things. But I think as much as anything, it's you've got to be, again, you start with your why, but also you got to think about where you're going, of being able to, if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? So being able to be kind of goal directed with those things. The other piece about, I guess, about productivity is learning how to outsource. I think one of the things that, again, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, I know I've made it, is that we tend to bootstrap too much. We try to do it all ourselves rather than either paying somebody else to do it or delegating it to somebody else. And so, one mistake that a lot of practice owners will make is that they'll hang on to being answering the phone calls and get handling intakes and referrals and that sort of thing. They'll do that too long, and that ends up eating up a big chunk of their day. But as therapists, the biggest commodity we have is our time and expertise. And so your time is best spent seeing clients and sitting in the therapy room with them. If you're spending time on calling people back, chasing people down to make appointments and that sort of thing, that's much better outsourced to somebody that's either a virtual assistant or hiring somebody, because you will absolutely get the return on the investment by doing those things. And so that's something that has helped me a lot, of being able to learn to delegate and pass things off to other people. Because if you try to keep it all on your plate, it will get unorganized, and you lose track of stuff, and things will fall for the cracks. That's in fact, again, that's exactly what happened to me early on in my practice, when I had just started a group practice and had another therapist that had come on to work with me. And one day I was just totally overwhelmed, and I realized I was dropping things and wasn't following through on things. And so I went and bought the book Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I would absolutely recommend that book if you're interested in getting a good system for time management and learning how to juggle all the things. Another book that I recommend is called Free to Focus by Michael Hyatt. And that's another good resource in terms of time management and staying organized. The other thing too is, as I mentioned, kind of alluded to, but I wanted to clarify, is that having good systems and processes in place. In other words, being able to take the time to write down all the things that you do. Like this, as a matter of fact, yesterday we were having a particular problem with an insurance company, and getting our credentialing straightened out with that. And so, I made the decision that when I was working through that problem, I wrote down all the steps that I took in order to solve that problem. So then we have a system for doing it in the future of, okay, these are the steps we need to take to get somebody credentialed with this particular insurance company. So, I'm not a naturally organized person, so it's something I have to put a lot of effort into. But one of the big hacks that I would say is, at the start of your day, is sit down and plan your day out. And that's what I use my planner for. I write down all the things that I need to focus on for that particular day. And that way you don't have to carry it in your brain and feel overwhelmed because you've got it there. My planner is my second brain now.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And then you don't have to sort of revisit throughout the day. What's next? What's next? What's next?
Right.
That
Right.
can be overwhelming, especially when there's a high volume of things inbound.
Yes, absolutely.
Right there. I love the idea of if you're going to put the energy into working through a new process, then put the energy into making that something repeatable. Because then invest that last little bit of time, because now you've really got a tool for the future, as opposed to just a frustrating moment and then it's gone in the waste bin of history behind you.
Right. Yeah. And it's and also figuring out ways to automate those things.
Yeah.
One thing that comes to mind is responding to emails. A lot of the emails that I respond to it's really kind of the same types of things. And so creating an email template in Google, in Gmail, you can do that. And that way it's just a few clicks and it populates the email for you. And you just add a few extras into it to make it personalized, and you're done with it. And so instead of just typing the whole thing out every time.
Yeah. How many hours must that save in a
Mhm.
year?
Right. So, yeah. So I think it's good to always just think of ways to automate and try to stay on track with your systems and processes.
Yeah, great. And the books you mentioned, I have read one of them, but reminded me of, I think it's time for a reread, and I'll have to check out the other.
Mhm.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah. That's that's one that I, even to my clients, a lot of times, one problem that a lot of people that come to therapy have is that they're just kind of living chaotic, unorganized lives. And so I'll recommend Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gordon. It was
this is great. Yeah, this is good to talk to you, and you get to hear me kind of talk about all this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it was excellent. So the podcast I'll mention again, The Practice of Therapy. It's really excellent. Check it out. Gordon, thank you so much.
Yeah. And they can, just so folks will know, the URL is just practiceoftherapy.com. And I've got tons of resources on there and courses. One course that I failed to mention that I've got up there is Money Matters in Private Practice. And that's a course that teaches the whole financial side of being in practice.
Yeah, that's good. And that was a very brief intro, but I'm positive that there is a lot there. I want to check it out.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Gordon, thanks so much. This was really great.
Thank you.
Take care.